Hi, everybody, and welcome to Heathen Talk, episode 30. Thank you, Lauren, for putting the number in the title. I appreciate it. Um, Tonight, we're going to go ahead and talking about heathenry with your family and friends, and the difficulties that presents, and ways you can maybe navigate those troubled waters. Tonight, it's just Lauren, Torin, and myself. You will notice that you can actually see all of our pretty faces, and we have a separate login for Heathen Talk. We're trying to make sure that our broadcasts run a little more smoothly so that, I don't end up sounding like a robot. Because that was fun last week, wasn't it? I don't see the pitch here, so I'll go ahead and give it. If you're listening to us on YouTube, please head over to our website, heathentalk.com. You can find all of our videos, our blogs, links to our Patreon, our shirts. We have a mug, I think.
And we will have a special shirt coming out next week.
Special shirt coming out next week?
It's for the... there will be a special shirt at a special price next week, so you want to be here next week to hear what it is. We might be here tonight, too. But
well, you should be here every night. This is a reminder that you do have one more week to submit your name ideas to the website for my snake. There's a picture on the website of my snake, needs a name. Go and submit, and you might win a book.
And we'll announce that on the 10th.
Yes.
The winner on the 10th, because on the 3rd is Ladies' Night 2, Midwest Boogaloo. I'm very excited to have 3 awesome ladies going to be joining us next week.
So come on, guys. Tell us what the name should be.
Yes. Also, if you're listening on iTunes right now, pause it and go leave us a review, or don't pause it and go leave us a review. More reviews we have, the more people can find us. I mean, that's we beg for reviews and for you to like things and stuff, basically so that other people can find good, quality heathen programming.
Also, Twitter. Go tweet at us. Lauren handles that. She loves talking to people.
Tumblr, if you follow us on Tumblr, and it's basically just an aggregate of what we post on Heathen Talk, so you can just get that directly delivered to you.
There's that. You can also go talk to us on Facebook.
Absolutely.
That's the thing.
There
are other things. You should find them and do them.
According to Facebook, we are very responsive. We have a very high response rate. We usually respond within 20 minutes. On average. And I think that's mostly drawn by the fact that if somebody messages us at like 2 o'clock in the morning, we don't usually answer till the next morning.
I think the only reason we have a really good response rate is because most of us are at some really terrible job during the day, and when we hear that ding in the app on our phone, it's just a way to get away from the drudgery for a minute.
It's true. So save Torin from drudgery.
Yes, save Torin from drudgery, definitely.
No. Don't save Torin from drudgery, because Torin cannot be on his phone that much at work.
Yeah, and I'm actually not as responsive as I used to be because I'm in class, but yeah, definitely reach out to us. We like talking to you guys. We like hearing your ideas. We like hearing your toast people that you want us to toast. We like hearing, when you hate what we're doing, or, I mean, really, just... We like interacting with the people who listen to the show.
Absolutely. I think that's pretty much all the pitching we have to do this week.
Buy a t-shirt.
Buy a t-shirt.
Torin and I are both wearing our shirts tonight.
It's true.
Although
Josh is not, because he's irresponsible.
There we go. Can't really see mine. I wore mine today to school, and one of my professors was like, "What's Heathen Talk?" So I'll actually talk about that a little later in the episode when we're talking about, how to talk to friends and family. How do you explain heathenry to a Mormon in this case?
Okay, that's a very convenient anecdote that you've acquired for yourself today, Lauren.
I know, it was really great. So tonight we have a special toast. It is a repeat toast, but I think it is super important because it's somebody who has accomplished something really, really huge in the heathen community right now. and that is to Josh and Kat Heath with the Open Halls Project. For those of you who don't kind of know, they've been trying. The Open Halls Project is a organization that tries to connect military heathens with local heathens when they get transferred around, because it can be really hard to connect with that local community when you're getting transferred fairly frequently, as tends to happen in the military. They also do some work with people who are deployed, and it's just a really great program, something that we here support wholeheartedly. Well, they have tried to get Asatru and Heathenry added to the religious preference list. So last year in January they said it had been, the Army had, not them, or the military said, and now it's not. And I do believe it's the Air Force that's the only one that has it currently.
I think you're correct on that.
I'm correct. So they, so now this year, at the end of last year, they put together a working group, and part of that working group's job was to deliver a chaplain briefing on heathenry to the Army Chaplain's Handbook. They based it somewhat on the documentation for Wicca, because that had been accepted, so you tend to follow the formatting that works. And so the chaplain, anyway, they had gotten a response back that the chaplain was interested in working with the group and adding Asatru over heathen. So they've continued to work through this. So now the good news and the exciting news is that this briefing that they submitted at the end of last year has been accepted. So there is now a briefing available to all Army chaplains, and usually, as they say, as the Army goes, the rest of the military tends to go. But there is this Army chaplain briefing now available on heathenry and Asatru. It's a really, really great briefing. It's very well written and very well put together. It is very, it's very inclusive. It's very good. It's a very good broad overview, so that more local or tribal customs can kind of fit nicely into that. So I'm pretty excited about it. And so to them, to Kat and Josh and everybody on the working group who put in all that effort, congratulations, first of all. That's such a huge win, not just for Open Halls, but I think for every heathen that's serving in our armed forces. So to you guys, hail. So Josh, what you drinking?
I am drinking yet another local Eugene beer. This is the VIP Vanilla Infused Porter by Hop Valley. I actually have a friend who works in one of their kitchens and is working very hard to get me to like them as much as I do Ninkasi.
What are you drinking, Lauren?
I am drinking some Sumatran Reserve coffee because Lauren is dry horn heathen now. And I've also got some really fancy almond milk creamer in it because I'm just like a plethora of food allergies, guys. It's becoming to the point where I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to continue to drink water. I feel like so.
Lauren, remind me to write myself a note. I feel like I need to send you some of the most awesome coffee on the planet, just because that's what you're limited to now.
Dude, you haven't even had the most awesome coffee on the planet yet.
Yeah, I have.
No, you haven't.
Have you met Joe, my neighbor? For those of you who are listening at home and don't know.
Well, yeah.
Joe has also acquired that coffee, Josh.
Has he?
Yes, he has, and I have tried it. So, moving along.
So you do know the best coffee in the world. There you go.
Right, and I also know the second best, which is what you drink.
Oh. All right, fine. Torin, we're going to skip over you for this week.
Yeah.
So let's get on to the show.
What? Torin, huh? Now, we have really good coffee here. We have West Rock coffee, which is amazing. Even though I'm usually drinking West Rock. I'm not drinking West Rock this week. But we have really good coffee here. You want to be all hipster and stuff. Arkansas actually got into this conversation today. Arkansas's got a lot going on. So, yeah. You and your hipsters can keep, be all hipstery and stuff.
Hey, I'm not doubting it.
Cute when the South gets uppity.
Isn't it? But hey, I'm not doubting it. Coffee is one of those things that's ubiquitous, man.
Oh man.
Everybody needs good coffee.
It's true. So,
So-
Torin, what are you drinking?
Tonight I am drinking a beer from Delaware. I know that is uncommon. I usually stick to the Cascadian brews for this show. But for those of you that are familiar with it, there's a brewery called Dogfish Head, and they do some really out there stuff sometimes. And know everybody who's drinking at home and knows about Dogfish Head. I'm not drinking Kvass, even though that is delicious. I am drinking. Sorry, there we go. Fort. This is a ale brewed with raspberries, and it's from a description point of view, its most defining characteristic is the fact that it's 18% and above ABV. Now, I expected that to mean it was going to taste very alcoholic. It does not. It tastes like a raspberry wheat ale. It's very delicious, and I highly recommend that you all go to the store and buy 3 bottles and drink them all back to back.
Don't issue challenges I'll take you up on.
I just want to say
that wasn't a challenge. That was a recommendation for your own well-being.
I just want to say raspberries and wheat. It's like death in a bottle for me.
So everybody but Lauren, go buy some.
Go buy some.
Go buy some of this stuff. It's at $10 a bottle. You're getting your money's worth at 18%.
So that means by the time we get to our third segment tonight, Torin's going to be fun.
That's the hope.
He's going to be fun. So
I'm going to tell you, I injured myself a little bit at work today. I fell off a 15-foot truck, and I landed well. But even landing well when you fall from 15 feet kind of sucks. So tonight was the night to bust out the big guns.
Big guns busted out.
So that said, why don't we start getting into the meat of the show?
exactly.
So the reason we're talking about this tonight is I'm actually working on, and I have it completed, it's just handwritten, a blog post about how to talk to your family when you recently converted. And it came up specifically because the conversation I had with my mother was a little difficult, and ended in some embarrassment, which we'll get into later tonight. But when we get into this, and I'm going to pose the question to Torin and Lauren here, ultimately, is telling them a good thing? Is it beneficial to you, to them? Can you make a firm decision either way on that?
Well, I don't think either way it's even necessarily if you're a new convert. I'll be flat out honest. I've never had that direct conversation with my family because it just won't end well. There's just no way that this is going to end well if I talk to my parents about this directly. So it's something we kind of choose not to talk about, mainly because I don't feel like having, when my mom leaves out books like, how to deal with a child who's turned from God when I'm visiting, it's just not going to end well.
So, from my point of view, that's not a question that any one of us can answer for you as an individual.
No.
There's no blanket statement that can be made about that. The honest answer is that it's going to depend on the family. And, I'm going to fall back on tired tropes about Frith and about the importance of keeping the peace within the family. And you need to understand, or at least try to understand, what impact that's going to have upon your family. Sometimes it's going to have a negative impact, but it's still better to get it out. I'd say that was my case. There was a little bit of a negative impact to be expected when I said something about it eventually, but I know my family well enough to know that it was going to be a passing negative. It wasn't going to be a long-term impact to my family. But, if you've got the type of family where, heads of your family are, serious like Westboro Baptist Church types, then that's probably going to have a pretty negative impact on your family, and you might reconsider whether or not it's a good thing to even mention it.
I know
Cue the
for
hate
me,
mail from WBC. Sorry.
Hey,
well,
you know what that would actually, they'd issue a press release and think of how many people would know about Heathen Talk.
I want hate mail from them so bad, and it's not even
Yes.
about publicity. It would just make me happy to be able to say I got hate mail from WBC.
I would like get it, like that would be like a badge of honor. We'd put that on the front page of the website forever.
I know. I showed up to
As hated on by the, as
you know,
hated on
it's
by
hated on by the WBC. I showed up to one of their counter protests once, and they had the bad taste to not show up themselves. It made me sad.
I went to a counter protest, and they attempted to show up, promptly got back in their van, and drove back to the airport.
See, they actually show up here, and I guess because it's driving distance for them. Around here though, we have giant bikers and people on tractors that will block the church for them. It's quite funny to see this giant line of bikers with giant American flags and people bringing their combines and their tractors up to block the view so that the mourners can't see Westboro Baptist.
Yeah, we had the
That's
Westboro
Arkansas.
threaten
That's
to show
Arkansas.
We had the Westboro threaten to show up, and we ended up with a line of about 50 tractor trailers and probably 150 bikers.
Oh yeah.
And I think close to 2,000 people show up in counter protest because they were there to protest a soldier's funeral.
Just an aside, folks, if you want them not to come, do a campaign where you give money to a gay or lesbian charity, and you have people pledge, like, I'll donate $5 for every minute they protest. They will not show up.
See, I think around here the reason they didn't show up, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if they did a drive-by and realized it wasn't their scene, but they were showing up to a local synagogue to protest a Jewish soldier's funeral. And I think they just kind of rolled by and they saw about 700 or 800 people doing the very casual, oh, we're not here for a protest, leaning up against street poles in Seattle. There's 700 people just happened to show up on the streets right here by the synagogue.
Seattle doesn't mess around with protests.
No, not really. If we even hear about something stupid like that, we had that recent thing where the Stormfront was making noise about doing a march through Ballard a couple months ago, and I think that I don't think any of them actually showed up, but there were something like 4,000 counter protesters marching through the streets. And, a lot of them were people that I would not share a drink with, but, I'll at least give them the fact that they showed up to counterpress those dickheads.
So,
let's get back on topic. Thanks for derailing us.
Successfully derailed.
Hey, sorry, Westboro Baptist is just one of those things. Everyone's got an opinion on it. So, yeah, let's talk about talking to our families.
Yes.
So, I tend to agree with Torrin on this, that there's just no way to know, no way for me to know how your family is going to react. I didn't even know how my family was going to react when I told them. So it's you really have to take into consideration who your family and friends are as individuals and what beliefs they hold, and how those beliefs are going to dictate their reactions.
I think that that's super important, and I think a lot about this as somebody who comes from a fundamentalist Christian family, and the fact that I don't know, I was not really publicly heathen until my grandparents passed away, because my grandmother was the matriarch of our family, and I just couldn't do that to her, because I knew it would, and I'm not trying, it would break her heart, and I just couldn't. I love my grandparents. They have their faults. They are a product of their generation, and I just couldn't be super openly, publicly heathen, until that point, or to the point that I knew that she wouldn't hear about it. when her health had declined to the point that it wouldn't upset her if she heard it. It would, she wouldn't understand. Because otherwise, what do you do? I just couldn't do that because, yeah, it was definitely all about keeping the family bond. I was already the disappointment in the family because I got divorced. I didn't want to make it worse.
So, on that note, in our relationships, there are people who we kind of have to tell just from the way we interact with them on a daily level, whether it's your wife, your husband, your favorite cousin, whoever it is that you are personally connected to on a deep level. How would you recognize a relationship where you needed to tell this person?
To me, it comes down to, am I going to have to out and out lie to someone? Because, like, with my parents, we don't talk about it. We just don't talk about it. I think with, like, my husband, or even my brother, they know, and I'm very open with both of them about it. I would have to lie. And I think that would harm my relationship with them far more significantly. Though to be fair, they're both atheists, so they think we're all dumb. Um, so, to me, I think it comes down to, would it hurt the relationship more to lie than it would to, I guess, a lie of omission? And for me, it comes down to, the people who my practice affects every day, like my husband. My husband, for being non-heathen, he takes me to more heathen stuff, and he's super supportive of my heathenry. For my brother, he and I are just very close. I think it definitely comes to, who are you going to, who are we going to, is it going to hurt them? Is it going to hurt the relationship more to not tell them?
What do you think, Torrin?
So, the question being,
who has to know?
Well, I think that anybody in your extremely immediate family kind of needs to know. If you're married, for example, your husband or wife really probably ought to know, because for example, my wife is not a heathen. She has her own thing going on, and but she knows that I'm a heathen. It'd be hard to hide it from her when I have to make her wear headphones to watch TV once a week for an hour and a half. But the flips, to add to that, though, I mean, there's points where I have asked her contribution to family ritual. That's important to have my wife, the woman of my household, participate in. Places where she's important to my family cult, my household cult. I'd imagine that it'd be really, really odd if your kids didn't know. But, do your parents need to know? Not necessarily. Grandparents? Probably not. Especially not at this point in time when a lot of our grandparents still come from an age where if you're not a Christian, you're going to burn in the hellfires of damnation. And beyond that, you're getting into an extended family that really doesn't need to know your personal business unless they happen to be extremely close to you. So, but honestly, the only people I would say need to know are, your, spouse and children.
I can agree with that. I mean, I think that the...
Sorry.
nature of it is...
sorry, guys.
Lauren's dogs are fantastic, by the way. I mean, they do their thing. We listened to them fight with each other earlier. It was hilarious. I lost my shit.
I think the nature of heathenry requires that some people will need to know, and those people like Torrin says, are likely to be the ones that very likely share your home. But in keeping with that old tired subject of Frith, it may be best not to tell your family, just to make sure that you're not causing undue friction within the family relationships.
I mean, I think that's what a lot of tonight's conversation is going to come down to, is evaluating within your own family what the reactions to your religious choices are going to be. Now, I know we're going to get into conversation as the night goes on about, so now they know whether you told them or they figured it out. Now they know what now. But as far as your contribution to it, whether or not you need to tell them, well, that's strictly up to you. None of us can tell you that answer. None of us can tell you how they're going to react. And the thing that it really comes down to is how damaging is their reaction to your conversion going to be to the family? Because in the end, it's not their reaction that's damaging the family. It's the fact that you opened your mouth.
Well, and I think that's an important thing to talk about here real quick, is the idea of facing rejection from your family due to this choice. It didn't happen to me. My mom is very convinced that I will eventually see the light and come back to Jesus, and that when I die, I won't really have a choice in the matter. But it very well could have gone the other way, where she just completely cut me out because I had chosen not only this new religion, but to openly and passionately share it with her.
Now, I do want to kind of touch back just real quick on something Torrin said. Yes, there's going to be that situation where, I think there can be situations within the family where, and it's going to be set by whoever the matriarch or patriarch is. For instance, you decide to be open with your family that you're heathen, and everyone but Aunt Ina is cool, and Aunt Ina throws a fit and starts, screaming Jesus and trying to give you a
exorcism.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, exorcism.
You're welcome.
That's a situation where it's hard on you. I just want to put that out there that, if the general family is accepting and just one person's kind of a holdout, that's kind of a different thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think we've tried to drill home in past episodes that, you really ought to try to identify who the head of your family is when it comes to dealing with questions of Frith. And I guess what that comes down to, and on this subject, sorry, that's me using delaying verbiage to let my brain get itself in order, is that, so let's say you consider your grandmother happens to be the head of your house. That tends to be the way it happens to be with people. Grandmothers tend to really be, at least in my experience, the first person you look to. And your mom has an issue with it. Well, that sucks. But your mom's not the one that has the power to break frith with you. And eventually your grandmother is going to figure out how to make her be reasonable.
Pretty much.
But, yeah, it's figure out who's in charge. It's the same thing, in any situation. You got to figure out how the person in charge is going to react. But Josh, what about families where you can't really tell if anybody's in charge?
See, I actually have this situation.
Me too.
And to be frank, I told my mother when I decided to be heathen, but it never really came up with any of the rest of the family. They all know I'm heathen because my youngest cousin asked me why my cross was broken.
That's precious. That really is precious.
It's kind of cool, honestly. I like that.
And it was a really great way to get into the conversation because I was forced to explain heathenry to a 7-year-old. And so everybody got the kid glove version and not the very passionate, I'm convinced I'm right version that my mother got. But I think that's probably my experience has been when you don't know who the family leader is, either you need to step up and be the family leader, because somebody needs to be, or you need to not stress your personal changes and help the family figure out itself first.
I think that's for me. My family's in a period of flux where we're kind of spinning off into smaller groups where we don't have that matriarch anymore since my grandmother passed away. And so now we're starting to move into kind of the next generation where there's, my dad and my mom and our family group, and where versus kind of how it used to be. And so, yeah, I totally understand. And that's sometimes you have to step up, and that's what I've been asking myself if I'm willing to do. But otherwise,
Well,
yeah, it
so
is.
I'm going to share an example of this. My family, where I grew up, is actually a combination of families due to the nature of divorce and fractious relationships and that sort of thing, right? And recently, the matriarch of part of my family stepped back, and she wasn't being a part of things, and so the family started to drift away from each other. And these are all Christian people and didn't actually recognize what was going on. It was kind of adorable. But one of the women stepped up and tried to fill that role, and it was a prime example of bringing up my personal religious conversion in that time would have only served to cause more chaos and more trouble because the family wasn't set and solid. I can bring it up now and debate it because the matriarch has stepped back into that position, but you have to know when it's appropriate and when it's not.
That's actually a really good point, is looking at what the stability of your family is. I mean, I guess it's kind of like you've gone and gotten your dumbass injured like I have, and you decide that's the best time to go perform some extreme sport. That's probably a bad idea. So you're going to do something that's going to stress your family. The worst possible time you can do that is when your family is already undergoing some entirely different stress.
Right. That I think that pretty much covers my position on what to do if you have a family that's either going through a transition or doesn't have that leadership in it. I think my family's beginning to develop that leadership, but we'll see.
Yeah, my family it's still developing, and I oddly enough think that at this point it's not going to be my mom, because the family feud, for lack of a better way to put it, is much more slanted to me and my brother than it is to my fundamentalist parents. So we'll see how that shakes out. So let's talk about talking about it.
Well, real quick.
Yeah.
There's a point that is a sub-point of a point in our thing that I think is super important, and we only briefly touched on it here, and I think it needs to be mentioned outright. It is... The notes here say it's okay if they don't accept your transition, your conversion, if you will. I would argue that it's not only okay, it's natural and right for them not to accept it.
We're going there earlier than I thought.
It's in the first section. We can touch on it more later, but I figured we could treat this like a teaser if you like.
Or we can do it now.
Get further into that 18% beer.
Well, see, that's thought. I thought we were saving this for the third segment when I would.
Well, all right. Then everybody who's listening, ignore me. We'll get back to that.
Are you sure? Because I was going to say evil, mean things to our fans.
You can do that after you finish drinking. That way they can't
Oh,
blame you for it.
oh, they can still blame me for it.
So, Lauren,
Yes.
um, one of the most difficult things that I've had to deal with Heathenry was giving that elevator speech. Having a
I
7-year-old ask me why my cross was broken and being forced to explain what heathenry is really put me on the spot. And it took me a solid 20 minutes to even get the words in an order that would make some sort of sense.
How many more minutes did it take you to get to the point where those words would make sense to a 7-year-old?
About an hour. By the time I got to that, everybody was confused, and it was a good time. But how do you go about crafting that short but informative elevator speech on what it is that heathenry is?
I'm going to say that the first thing, absolutely, is know your audience. To me, that's such a huge deal. Know your audience. Know, how I'm explaining heathenry to my mom versus how I'm explaining heathenry to, a 7-year-old versus how, like today when one of my professors asked me what heathen talk was. It's just, I feel like there's different, you give different answers to different people for a very good reason, because different people, have different levels of understanding.
That's fair. Um, Knowing your audience is definitely important. I think a really big part of that is also knowing ahead of time how to talk about complex subjects. I think this is one of those things that not enough people know how to do, and so you end up with a lot of yelling and screaming. But, Torin, have you ever had to give that quick and dirty heathenry is blank talk?
Well, not really, because I got lucky. On my mother's side of the family, now I will preface this by saying that I've never really sat down and talked with my grandmother about it. And she is undisputedly the head of my family. Now, she knows, but we've never sat down and talked about it. There is a sort of tacit, behind-the-scenes approval while public disapproval of it, which, if you understood my family, would make perfect sense because she's Catholic, but she's Swedish. So, as far as my mother goes, on that same side of the family, she's always been one of those really casual Christians, so she voiced some really generic disapproval of it and then moved on with our lives. And on my father's side of the family, where I was more concerned about it, my dad just, I broke it to him in bits and pieces. Which is, honestly, one of the strategies that I've told people to attempt before is to kind of break people into it. First they understand your interest in, Norse mythology, if you will. For those of you listening without the video feed, I used air quotes on that. To, spawn those conversations where they can begin to understand the outlook. And over time, you can break it to them as, in small increments as a religious belief. And by the time you actually get to the point where you're mentioning to them that that's your religious belief, they've already sort of figured it out. This is not going to be one of those things that works universally because nothing works universally. But you're going to know if it's not going to work because they're already going to start to get that idea and they're going to start to push back before you ever get there. But that's the road I went down with my father. And as I came to the realization over time that in my dad's mind, and eventually he actually put it into words, he's still a Christian, but he believes that, everybody finds their own route to God. And that this is my route to God as far as he's concerned, so it doesn't really matter to him. It leads to me leading a very good life in his eyes, and so it doesn't bother him in the slightest. But, as has been reflected upon before on this show and in my private conversations with people, I've got a pretty charmed family life, as it were. I don't have any serious difficulties in my family. I don't have any serious difficulties keeping the faith. But yeah, that's what it comes down to with my people.
See, my experiences have been a bit varied. When I told my mother, she was very quiet, very calm. She actually ended up, this is embarrassing, I didn't know what I was doing when I told my mom, and she ended up on Stormfront and was convinced that I was that kind of heathen. It took me a solid month to show that I wasn't. But at least she was interested, right? She wanted to know what I was talking about. My stepdad, on the other hand, I got a random text from him early December asking if my religion accepted gifts during winter. So he just didn't at all pay attention when I talked about my religion with him.
But on the flip side, that shows that he was actually giving a crap.
Right. So, I mean, he wasn't paying attention, but he cared. She was paying attention and thought I was a racist. I mean, it was good times. So, for me, that elevator speech has had such mixed results simply because when I gave it at that time, I didn't know that it was okay to say, I don't know. And so instead of inviting myself to do more research, I just grabbed the first source I could find and went with it, and it ended up causing issues down the road. And I think that for any good 6-minute conversation, you have to be able to say, I don't know.
Oh, yeah. And, most heathens I know have a really hard time with that phrase, admitting they don't know something, myself included.
Well, and I'm going to go ahead and say here, that's going to be a difficult thing for anybody to do. And I'm not going on the pride issue. I'm going on the issue of how the person you're saying I don't know to is going to respond to you saying I don't know. Because strangely, people have a hard time being, what's the word I'm looking for? I have no idea, so I'm going to just go with the longer version of it. People have a strange time thinking about things from the internal perspective. They're going to expect you to know everything there is to know about your religion, while not realizing that they themselves don't know everything there is to know about their own religion. They might ask you some question like, well, can you name all the gods and goddesses? And they're going to use the fact that you can't, because you can't, even if you think you can. They're going to use that fact to say that obviously you're not really very serious about that. But I doubt any of them could, if they're Catholic, I doubt any of them could name all the saints, for example. But they're not going to necessarily see that, because people have a hard time criticizing themselves. And that's where it's up to you to criticize yourself and realize that you don't know everything. And
well, absolutely, and I think that's important, because not everybody who's telling their family for the first time is going to be a new heathen, right?
Right.
Some people are going to come at this from being a heathen for quite a while before even mentioning it to family, and they're still going to have to be comfortable admitting that they don't know. Because you try explaining the concept of weird, to your mother in 6 minutes. You
Well,
can't
we
do
got
it.
we got an email for the for our advice column, and the question was basically, how do I explain to non-heathens about how my child is not considered fully accepted into the, fully human until a certain point? And the fact of the matter is, there's the harsh reality that families would have to expose infants because they couldn't support them, or they had to do what was best for the family. That's a hard truth from back then, but that's not something you want to tell your people who aren't heathen. Well, we do this because in case, that makes you sound like a monster. And so you have to think through, okay, how do I explain this? Because, yeah, I mean, heck, I would argue that a lot of heathens don't understand some of the more in-depth theological points of our religious belief system. I mean, I don't fully understand them, and I've been around heathenry for almost 15 years.
I would say that you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody who understands all the theological ins and outs of it.
Well, anybody who understands all the theological ins and outs of any religion.
Right.
I know, well, he's passed, but I know a man who had been a student of Christian theology all his life for 60 years, and he was the only person I'd ever met in a church who was comfortable saying, I don't know.
I believe
Everybody
I've
else had to try and explain it.
I believe I've seen a graph about the subject about, as the curve when something about, when you know a little bit, how much you think you know goes this way. And the more you start to learn about it, the more you think you know goes down. And eventually you kind of hit a bottom point where you know more than most people, but you think you know nothing. And I find that really to be true. I mean, at least for me, the more I learn about heathenry, the more I question whether or not I'm comfortable telling other people what to believe about heathenry.
It's one of those things. There's that classic. I don't even remember which side it supports, but if you put all the knowledge we have in a box, how much does it represent, right?
Mm-hmm.
In heathenry, that box can get bigger and bigger, but it'll never encompass 100% of everything there is to be known about heathenry, because we can never know everything that there is to know about it. And that makes these conversations even more difficult, because you can't just point to a pastor or a rabbi and say, oh, well, they're teaching me, they can explain it. If I want my mother to truly understand it, I've got to send her to go watch 3 hours of Neil Price lectures, another 3 hours of, Raven Radio, and then on top of that, hand her a copy of Culture of the Teutons and say, have fun.
And let's be honest here, how many heathens have really actually read both volumes of Culture of the Teutons? Not how many have said they have, because I haven't. I haven't finished the second one.
I haven't finished the first one. I'm still making my way through it.
I think that it's also, I don't know. There are things I don't know. There are things that are very much my own personal, and then you get into house cult and reaching. It's just, sometimes for me, so I kind of want to go back to what is your elevator pitch, Torrin or Josh, when it comes to if someone asks, what's heathen? What's ossetry? What's heathenry?
Torrin, do you got one?
Yeah, elevator pitch?
Or your Reader's Digest condensed version, for those of you old enough to remember it.
I do
remember those. Talking to a non-heathen.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's difficult. It depends on the heathen.
Let's just say let's say not a family. Let's say someone that you are an acquaintance with.
Right.
Somebody you know through, like, you do SCA or something like that.
Right. Well, I mean, a great example was there's a guy who is a heathen, and had not really had a great time at trying to explain. He was very new heathen, hadn't had a really great time explaining to his boyfriend what heathenry is. And he came to, drink with my tribe for a couple of times, and he brought his boyfriend with him one time, and his boyfriend started questioning us. And that was probably one of the most unique, because the guy had some great questions. But that's what it comes down to, is I don't really have an elevator speech. I have, what's a heathen? Well, we practice the same religion that the pre-Christian Northern Europeans practiced. What's that? Well, it's a polytheistic religion that follows gods like Odin, Thor, Freya, etc. And then you just, like, for me, I just kind of like wait for them to give me questions and try to figure out on a case-by-case basis what the easiest way to answer them is within the level that I've judged them to be at as far as understanding. And they'll either follow the questions up or they'll move on to a different subject. I really don't have an elevator speech.
To me, I do, because I'm one of those people who I like to be prepared for these things, to have, like, what happened today, basically to be, and it's not like this fixed thing I recite, but in general I say, it is the pre-Christian religion of Northern Europe. It's very family and ancestor oriented, and we, that generally I have found in the South that family oriented is so helpful. I actually usually don't touch on the gods much, because unless someone asks, because without fail, every time I've tried to have this conversation, especially like with somebody like a gamer or something, oh, you mean like in the comic books? And yeah, I can't even.
See,
when it, yeah.
Mine's gotten shorter and shorter the more I think about it, and I tend to tell people that heathenry is a religion that recognizes the worth of our ancestors and honors them through our actions, which we also recognize impact the fates and such of our family. And try to tie it all together that way without mentioning the gods or afterlives or anything.
Yeah.
And usually they either fuck off because they don't understand it, or they ask questions.
I will say I'm completely unashamed to admit that if the person asking is somebody that I really don't give any shits about, and in fact would like them to fuck off, I'll look at them and say, oh, it's the pre-Christian Northern European religion. We've gone back to the old ways of worshiping the old gods, blood sacrifice, all that. But I'm a terrible person.
SCA answer.
Yeah.
But I'm a terrible person, so you shouldn't necessarily follow my example.
Well, for me, like today, so the conversation I had today was, that What Heathen Talk, well, it's the podcast that I do. What it's about? Well, it's a religious podcast. I'm a heathen. It's, and then I kind of say, it's a pagan religion based in Northern Europe. Very much focuses on families and relationships. And she's like, oh, that's interesting. And then we got into this conversation about like how Mormonism and heathenry have similar kind of focuses on maintaining family bonds, though very different perspectives. It's something that's important to both. And I thought that was a really great conversation. That was a great way to kind of turn the conversation back on her and not have to talk about it much more. But I definitely think that if you're nervous about it, have like a little something. Have, a definition in your head so that you're not just freaking out. I almost feel like it's in the same way of like when you go through and do a whole bunch of like fake job interview questions to have an answer for. But that's just me. I'm one of those people. And if you're like me and have anxiety and prepare for everything, it helps.
Yeah. Um, so in a bit, we're going to ask for questions from the audience because it's what we do, right?
Yeah.
Um, Mark, since I know you're listening, if you could see if maybe somebody has an interesting elevator story that would be fun to share with everybody on air, maybe we'll take a couple of minutes and share one.
So do we want to talk about the hard stuff?
Um, well, Torin disappeared, but
Yeah.
sure.
Um, so here's the thing. You've told your friend or family member or boss or whatever that you're heathen, and they Google it. And you end up with Josh's situation where his mom ended up on Stormfront. Um, I was really funny when we were doing the show notes. I put down what to do when someone you love Google's Ossitru.
Cry is the correct answer.
Right. But really, I, to me, I guess living in where I live, where we have a lot of Christian identity, and those kind of people, I'm able to kind of say, well, that kind of behavior is very similar to, around here it's the covenant, the sword, and the arm of the Lord, where they take a religious belief and pervert it to fit their own ideological beliefs. And I think that that's, plus there's also the you can't always trust everything you hear or read on the internet unless it comes from us.
Even then, fact check us.
Fact check us. We have been wrong maybe once. I don't know.
Just don't do it with Bing. Don't use Bing ever.
No, I like
Bing is
Bing.
the devil.
Unless you're looking for porn. I mean,
I see. Okay, that's a discussion for another time. But anyway, Torin, welcome back. We're talking about what to do when someone you love Google's Ossitru.
Thank you. Sorry, my neighbor showed up. So yeah, that's important. So when somebody Googles Ossitru, well, here's
someone you care about Googles it.
Right. I kind of was figuring that.
When someone you love.
Well, I guess the implication here is that they find bad information, probably information pertaining to racism, white supremacy, Stormfront, etc., or any other manner of stupidity. The thing is, you're going to be assuring them that that is not, in fact, what you believe, and they are not going to believe you.
Yeah.
Truth.
That's just a thing. They're not going to believe you because they saw it on the internet, and everybody knows that everything on the internet is true. You also have to realize that you're most likely dealing with people who see religion as a monolithic entity. That when they see that, according to what they found on the internet, people who aren't of Germanic descent can't be heathens, and that they're generally bad people and should be exterminated as a tenet of heathenry, they're just going to assume that that is a tenet of heathenry no matter what you say. And they're going to think you're whitewashing it. So this is one of those situations where actions are going to speak.
I'm sorry, but whitewashing it, that was a very nice play on words there.
I blame the beer.
Yeah, I mean this is definitely going to be a situation where your reputation with your family or your friends or coworkers or whoever it is going to come greatly into play, because if you are a person of worth to your family and they know, for instance, if anybody in my family Googled it and saw racism, they would be very confused because I am the flaming liberal of the family. I'm probably the only person who's dated outside my race in my family. So, I mean, it's a little bit, yeah, that would confuse them, I think, more than, but, I've told the story on the show before about I've had a coworker accuse me of being a white supremacist who, because I was wearing a Mjolnir, because her only exposure to, for her, it was her exposure had been involved, covering something at a prison.
Right.
And it's definitely actions and your worth and your reputation are going to help you combat that. Also, can we talk about the topic that comes up down here a lot? You're a
Well,
Satanist.
none of us are down there, so
I
you'll have
just
to
said
lead the.
it. You're a Satanist. Being
So,
accused of being a devil worshiper.
actually, I think I've mentioned it on the show before, but I got accused of supporting virgin sacrifice.
Really?
Yeah,
Where'd you find one?
I live in Eugene. I don't know that there are any, but you get weird stuff like that all the time just for not being Christian.
Yeah.
I've never been called a Satanist,
You
but
know, yeah. I
Oh, I
mean,
have.
not as necessarily as Christians, but here in the general non-Christian community, we had a New Age store open up here, and of course, this was back when newspapers were still relevant. That is totally slam at you, Arkansas Democrat Gazette. There were months and months of just horrible letters to the editor talking about how, you know, the end is nigh because there was a New Age store.
well, and there was a recent story about that in your neck of the woods where
I actually know I know the people who were involved. I actually covered that for Panegyria magazine. The Seeker's Temple, which is a paleo-pagan, ancient aliens pagan church in a little town called Beebe, Arkansas, which is about an hour outside of Little Rock. It's a small college town, probably maybe 10,000 people, and they wanted a zoning variance so that they could have their church and their parsonage on the same lot, and the city refused, even though many other churches had exactly that. And there was a church across the street from them that was, it's called, I'll post pictures on Facebook because y'all ain't gonna believe this shit.
Well,
It had
that
a
was.
gi-
I'm sorry, Laura, not to interrupt you, but that is the single most southern thing that has ever popped out of your mouth on this podcast.
well,
Y'all ain't gonna believe it.
y'all ain't gonna believe this shit. So there's this church. It's called Lighthouse Baptist or Lighthouse Christian. I can't remember. We took pictures because we drove over there. And it was across the street from Seeker's Temple, the parsonage, and they have a giant lighthouse, complete with light, the whole 9 years. Only it's like 2 stories tall, but it's as big. It's like the circumference of a lighthouse, and like with a full-blown lighthouse light in it. And they were shining that lighthouse light into their front windows all night.
Into
And
the front windows of the store?
no, of the parsonage of the house.
Of their own church. Okay.
Um, and Bert, who think what you will, whatever. Bert is a combat veteran and has PTSD, and it just was this really shitty situation where these people were, basically asking for the same thing pretty much every other church had in town. And then, of course, there's a town hall meeting, and it was insane. Like, the only reason I got a seat is because I had a press pass. It was absolutely insane, that people were doing this to them. And all I'm thinking is it wouldn't have cost anyone anything to give them that variance, to allow them to have their church, because the property was plenty big enough, to have their church and have their parsonage on the same plot. It wouldn't have cost anyone anything. They were in an area that was zoned for it. It just, that's something that realistically happens. And to be fair, sometimes we get asked, are you Wiccan? And, people assume that paganism is a monolith. And I don't share the beliefs with Seeker's Temple. Their beliefs are strange to me. But at the same time, sometimes I feel like I need to stand up for people like that, or like Unitarians or whatever, that are getting that same backlash when you live here. And you live in a small town or a rural area where Christianity goes from being, the overculture, drink, to being, I think that's the first time we've said that tonight, from being the overculture to being a bully. So, But mud on. But it was, yeah, it's that stuff does happen here, and I've genuinely been worried. Okay, if my kindred ever got big enough, we wanted to buy land, would we have problems?
I think that's a I think it's a genuine point of concern. Um, I know there was recently an article posted by a reputable author about how paganism is an intergenerational um, track, and to be frank, it may be that in your lifetime your kindred will have problems if it tries to buy land. But hopefully, in your children's lifetimes, or in their children's lifetimes, they'll be able to have their own place that is specifically your black bear kindred, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully by that time it'll be accepted that black bear kindred is a part of this community and they do good work and this land is theirs.
And I have to go back to a point that I've harped on, and I've almost got that blog post finished on. I've posted once about this. Guys, that's why we're heathens. And we don't have to have this false modesty of when we do things. We should be able to boast, and we should be boasting about the things we do. So if your group goes out and adopts a highway, put that sign up. Being involved in the community, it's like I said, it's the reputation versus words on the internet. And if you build that good reputation in your community as being good, solid folks, then it's definitely going to benefit you in the long run.
Absolutely. Torin, you've been quiet. You've been drinking. Say something.
Are you sure you want me to do that? Because I finished that bottle of 18% beer.
Did you open another bottle of 18% beer?
No, I wish I had another bottle of it because it was fucking delicious. No, actually, I moved on to Old Horizontal from Victory.
Victory's a good brewery.
Yeah, it's an 11% barley wine because screw sobriety tonight. My knee hurts. So
what?
Here's the pain break.
What? Yeah.
Well, so, Torin, I'm going to lead you into this topic because I know it's one you've been wanting to talk about.
Wanting to talk about or promise to talk about?
Both, admit it.
Yes, because I promised to talk about it, and in the end it'll let me say horrible, evil things to our viewers. I'm about to say nasty things to you all. Enjoy it.
So, we briefly touched on it earlier about how your family may not accept it, may not be accepting of you once you express your conversion. But I said something rather strong, and I said that it was natural and right for them to not accept it.
That is absolutely true. So we discussed many times on here the idea of frith. Both in the episode we had previously, I don't remember what number episode it was, that was specifically about frith. We've talked about frith in many episodes when it was apropos to our subject matter. And we discussed many times that you need to identify who is the head of your family, who it is that actually controls the frith, who holds the frith, who decides who is part of the frith, etc., etc. Now, one thing that's always kind of been implicit in that is that that person is sort of the judge in your family. And because this is not a democracy in most families, that person is also the jury and the executioner. And that is the person that you really need to pay attention to. And if that person is not okay with you being a heathen, then you are damaging your family. And when you damage your family, it is your fault. So what I'm saying here is that when you reveal to your family that you've converted to heathenry, if you have that type of family that is very big on another religion in our culture, it's most likely going to be Christianity. You're doing damage to your family, and that's a bad thing. You're going against the wishes of your family, and that's a bad thing. I'm not necessarily saying it's a thing you shouldn't do, because, well, I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb here and say that most of us have families that would prefer we didn't have a religion like heathenry. But you need to recognize the fact that you are going against your family and causing damage to it.
Can I add to your point here?
Absolutely, because if you don't, I'm going to tell everybody how horrible they are, and I am going to go
I'm
on
about
and
to
on
tell
about
everybody how horrible they are.
People.
Heathenry, we've talked about how we're very much about tradition. But there is an uncomfortable fact that we all have to square with. For at least hundreds and more likely thousands of years, well, 1,000 years, not thousands. Let's not be too hyperbolic here. Your family tradition has been Christianity.
Oh, yeah.
By choosing to, as Mark puts it, deconvert from an aberrant mentality, you are rejecting generations of tradition. You are committing a transgressive act. And so it is natural and right for the family to see that almost as a cancer developing. And they're going to work to mitigate whatever damage they think you're going to cause. Which means it is your job to show that, at worst, your being heathen is completely benign to the family. And at best, it strengthens it.
And that's going to be difficult, because if, and we're going to go ahead, and I'm going to say this now so I don't have to keep repeating it. I'm basing this assumption off the idea that you come from a Christian family. If you don't come from a Christian family, there's a good chance this doesn't apply to you. And if you come from a family that holds a strong religious belief, it probably does apply to you. But as we were saying, you're going against many years of tradition in your family, probably 1,000 years of tradition in your family for most Europeans, or people of European descent, as Josh was putting it. Yeah, you know what? I'm sorry, Josh. I'm going to go ahead and take a drink while you pick up where I lost the flow there.
I have no clue what he was saying. Not one.
I had a clue, and then I lost it because
I will say that. I will say this. I think about my own family, and they were, at one point in time, in one generation, my family was extremely racist. And those of you who know me know some of the stories, and it is. My dad's, yeah, anyway. The next generation, they were less. They were more accepting. By the time you get to me, I don't care. So I kind of feel that way, it's generational. To go back to that point, my mom and dad will probably never accept that I'm heathen. Although I at least believe in divinity, so I guess I've got one up on my atheist brother. But my brother does, And my brother, when he has children, is going to teach that tolerance and that acceptance to his children. And I think that's something we have to remember. Just because it sucks right now doesn't mean it won't change. If you look at look at the attitudes of other things that were considered transgressive, even just 10, 15 years ago versus now, things change and we grow, and your family knowing, if you're in a position where you can be openly heathen and people knowing you and knowing what kind of person you are, then when they hear so-and-so is a heathen, and they're like, oh, okay. Well, I know Torin. Torin's a heathen. Torin's a stand-up guy. No big, then it just becomes like oh, did you hear Torin? I don't know, cut his hair. It's just a non-thing.
Like
Okay,
that's
maybe
okay.
not that statement. Did you hear that? Torin created a new beer. It's just not a big deal because it happens all the time.
Mark, you've gone too far. That's completely out of context for the rest of you, but you've gone too far.
So we did have one elevator pitch to share, if you don't mind me sharing it, Josh.
Go for it.
This is from Lost Penguin on the Irish Sea. The closest I've ever come to an elevator pitch is the one that I gave my little sister, who is convinced that I became a heathen just despite my wannabe Pentecostal preacher father. Heathenry is an attempt to rekindle the ways of old Europeans, so just call it Vikings. It's a religion that embraces many deities instead of one, supposedly infallible God. But the focus is not on being pure and godlike, but instead on being the best person you can be while trying to make your community better than it was before. And you get to drink a lot and write it off as a sacrifice, which is a bonus.
That is definitely an elevator pitch.
Yeah, I don't know about the drinking and the Viking part, but I do like. I will say here, I like this statement in here that you said, Lost Penguin, about um, focus on being the best person you can be while trying to make your community better. I would add for your tribe than it was before. Also, someone just posted on the IRC, I'm a heathen, family values and booze, and that pretty much sums it up. But I definitely think that there is actually, it's a really good way to put it. I do think there's some really good parts there that I may take for my own little pitch.
So there's something we didn't really cover when we should have, but we brought up the elevator pitches again. I think something important is having a true baseline knowledge before you even consider having this conversation. You don't need to be not every heathen needs to be a theologian. Not every heathen needs to have his own podcast. Not every heathen needs to write a book. But heathens have, as much as we are orthopraxic, we all share certain beliefs as well. Whether it's in weird, luck, or log, those things are central to our theology. And so you need to have a baseline knowledge there before you even broach the conversation.
That's a really good point. I mean, you're going to run into difficulties with that. Because if somebody finds out you're a heathen when you don't know enough to actually tell them about it, they're going to very rightly question why you're a heathen. Sorry, Lauren, do you have something to say?
I want to go a step further. If you don't know why you're a heathen, you shouldn't be calling yourself a heathen.
Well, you may know.
Just done. Sorry,
Right,
I mean,
that's true.
I mean, I'm just going to lay this
I
out
disagree completely.
No, I agree with you, and I'm gonna open that back up to you in a second, Josh. And I really don't give a fuck if you're the boss. I'm going to keep talking for a minute. I agree with you, Lauren, that if
Take
you
another
don't
drink, Torin.
Shut up. If you don't know why you're a heathen, you probably shouldn't be calling yourself one. However, there's a difference between not knowing why you're a heathen and not being able to articulate why you're a heathen. That is a distinct difference, and it's difficult. You may not be able to explain to people why it is that you believe the things you do. And you may not be able to necessarily articulate to people why you believe the things you do at all. And that's probably not the best time in your life to be telling them that you're a heathen. That's going to be one of those things where community is really important to you.
Hold up. Did we really make it to 8:20 before we got to anything that was worth arguing about? Because you're both wrong.
Well, no,
Josh,
actually, what's happening, Josh, is you're wrong.
you're
I'm
wrong.
going to continue my statement.
Yeah.
Is that if you're unable to articulate why you're a heathen, even if you understand on some unarticulatable level why you're a heathen, that's a word. Fuck you all. Even if you're not able to understand on an articulatable level why you're a heathen, that's probably not the best time to tell your family that you're a heathen. Try to figure out how to tell them first. So, Josh, tell us why you're wrong.
Torin, why are you a heathen?
Why am I a heathen?
Yeah.
I'm a heathen because I have had experiences that have led me to be heathen.
Like what?
There are certain things I don't talk about.
That's fine, but this is the point. You can't articulate why you're a heathen.
I'm going to stop you there real quick.
Hold up, I'm making a point.
I know you're making a point.
No, you shut your drunk mouth and you let me finish my point before you interrupt.
Oh, I'm not drunk yet.
Oh, snap.
You have yet to see me drunk. No, you've seen me drunk, but the rest of you have yet to see me drunk. My point is that, Josh, you're asking that question. It's a bit of a setup.
Of course I am.
I'm not able to articulate to the crowd, as it were, to the listeners, why I'm a heathen. To my family, that's different. Those experiences are something I would relate to them.
My point is, not everyone is going to have transcendental experiences that lead them to heathenry. In fact, I would argue that your children, the only reason they will have to be heathen is because my father was heathen.
Fair.
And having a reason to be heathen is, to me, like saying you have to have a reason to breathe air.
I disagree because you have to have, okay, so maybe not a reason to be heathen, but a reason you were converting, a reason you converted. Why did you leave X to, leave what is the family tradition to do something else?
However,
and I can articulate mine, so yeah, screw you.
However, for most people, becoming heathen isn't going from Christian to heathen. For most people, there's a period of, I don't know what the hell I am. This isn't making any sense anymore. And you talk to people who are converting, and that's their reason, is they didn't know it wasn't working, so they went through a period of transition and ended up being a heathen because it works. What you're essentially saying by saying you have to be able, or you have to have a reason for leaving Christianity, or you have to have a reason for being heathen, is you're telling people, if you don't know, then you can't do it. And that's simply not the reality.
I disagree. I think it is a situation where you're saying, if you don't know, don't try to explain it to someone else, and give yourself a chance to actually understand and learn more before you call yourself heathen. That's all I'm saying.
What you said.
I did say that if you don't understand why you're heathen, you shouldn't call yourself heathen, and I'm going to stand behind that.
No, I agree with both of you. And I'm going to agree quite aggressively with both of you.
We're good at that on this show.
Aren't we?
And we don't even have Toby with us.
I know, right? If you don't know why you're a heathen, that doesn't mean you can't call yourself a heathen. That just might mean it might not be the best time to tell your family why you're a heathen.
See, I can agree with that statement. That I'm perfectly fine with.
And that's what I was trying to get at, is that, if you cannot articulate to other heathens why you're a heathen, then it's probably not the best time to articulate to your family why you're a heathen.
I just think you shouldn't. I guess because I've seen too many people jump in with both feet and decide they're heathen when they don't know even what the fuck heathenry is.
I just want to point out that that's 3 tonight, kids.
3? Oh, sorry.
At least.
Like I said, that's a pet peeve of mine, and I don't think you should go out and declare that you're whatever until you have done some research, know what you're doing, and actually think you're
So,
not gonna,
well,
yeah.
I think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're saying is your pet peeve is people who come in and say, I'm a heathen, I'm a super heathen, and then a week later say, never mind, I'm a druid.
And you know what? I'm gonna own up. I've done that. When it comes to religion, I went through a time when I was very confused and trying to find a place and using religion anyway. Point being, I just, yeah, I mean, there's a certain point that you just have to say, okay, as I've matured, I guess I kind of know, okay, I'm not going to go out and claim I'm a wood carver because I bought some wood carving tools. I'm not going to claim I'm a brewer because there's yeast in my fridge. You can put a kitten in the oven and it's still not a biscuit, to go even more southern. So, yeah.
That was really southern. I was going to point out there are at least 3
I
varieties
think
of hops in my freezer.
I think that the metaphors there break down a little bit because, as we stress time and time again, and as I contradicted myself earlier, heathenry is about what you do, how you behave, how you act, how you perform ritual, and within that there are beliefs that come along with that. But I think you're going to be hard pressed to make the argument that someone who is behaving heathen, who by all appearances and by reputation lives heathen but cannot tell you why, isn't heathen.
Well, then maybe I should amend my statement. If you can't tell somebody what heathenry is,
Unfortunately,
yeah.
it's 8:27 and we don't have time to continue this argument, and I think we could go for another 90 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Easily.
So, next week, Ladies Night 2, Midwest Boogaloo. Very excited to have 3 tribe leaders from the Midwest going to be joining us. Everyone on the show is going to be in the same time zone. We won't know what to do with ourselves. Yeah, so next week it's all about the central time zone.
So next week, Torrin and I don't have to be like on the show.
No.
Yay!
We get a night off, Torrin.
Awesome. I'd fist bump you if you weren't in Eugene.
I'm working on it. So real quick, before one of my producers throws something at me from Boise, y'all should go to the Patreon and check it out. We are actually working on something really exciting. We're trying to figure out how exactly to pull it off, so we're not going to tell you exactly what it is yet. But for those of you who do donate money, keep checking your inboxes. There's something coming down the pipeline just for you.
And you guys will get a week early on our new show, 5 Minute Havamal, which due to illness had to be delayed a week. So I apologize for that. Things happen. My eye is swollen. Is pretty much swollen shut sometimes. So yeah.
And I just want to throw this out there again because it apparently annoys him. Boise.
If you have a heathen event coming up, please, 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 please go to our website, heathentalk.com, where there's also a link for our Patreon, and go to the events tab up top, and we have a little form there. Fill it out. We will announce your events for free. We will promote them as long as they fit the criteria which is there on the form, so please read it and pretend it does. Or,
So, beyond that, other than us sitting here for 90 minutes a week aggressively agreeing with one another, we are trying to put out some blog content for you people where we're able to get our own words out as well as we can on various subjects. If you guys have specific things you would like to see us write about in the blogs, let us know. I know myself right now, I am completely failing to write a blog about the depth of theology and heathenry. So if you guys have any input on the various blogs that we might write or any subjects we talked about, feel free to let us know, either on our Facebook page or even better, directly via email.
Which, by the way, all of our email addresses are our first name at heathentalk.com.
Somebody shot me an email.
Ooh,
Somebody
fancy.
actually used the email. I haven't replied to them, mostly because I don't know how that's going to work since it forwards to my personal email address. But
We
I
have
got it.
yeah,
If you're listening to this, I got your email.
we have a advice column as well. So if you have heathen life questions, send them to me, and I will give you mediocre advice.
There you go. That's the show, folks. And
Yep.
If you
You're
have
doing
any
it
questions about the show that we didn't answer, also feel free to email us, because I'm pretty sure that there are probably some questions out there that didn't get covered.
Or you can email Toby.
Yeah, you can always email
Absolutely
Toby. He
email
appreciates it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what was it you were saying, Josh?
You're doing it wrong.
And you're not the boss of me.
That's because you've
Everybody.
had too much to drink.
Everybody have a great week.
Cheers.